The Black Thief.
Douglas Whitfield blocked the door. Billionaire, 42 restaurants, 3 nights undercover, following a dishwasher who stayed 3 hours after closing time.
I knew it. The moment I saw your file, people like you, they're all the same.
Sir, you're wrong. Don't.
It's in your blood. Pack your bags. You're fired.
Just open the bag, please.
Why should I listen to a thief?
Open it, then fire me.
Douglas yanked the zipper. 8 containers, handwritten labels, home-cooked meals for 8 elderly people living alone. Number 4, Miss Eileen, cornbread, no sugar. Douglas held his breath. That was his mother's name, the mother he hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Why did his dishwasher know her? What did Solomon do each night in that kitchen? And what brought Douglas Whitfield to his knees when he finally saw the truth? But before any of that, before the bags, before the accusations, before Douglas Whitfield heard a name that nearly stopped his heart, there was just a man, waking up at 5:10 in the morning, alone. Solomon Harris lived above a laundromat on the south side of Atlanta, studio apartment, one room that tried to be a bedroom and a living room and failed at both. The walls were thin enough to hear his neighbor's television. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like an open hand. It had been there before Solomon moved in. His mattress sat on the floor. No bed frame, but the sheets were tucked tight. Crisp, military corners. When you grow up in the foster system, the only thing you can control is how your bed looks in the morning. On a small shelf, a worn culinary textbook, a Bible, a dog-eared copy of Kitchen Confidential he'd read 11 times. No television, no couch, a single-burner hot plate, a mini fridge. Inside the fridge, 8 food containers, each one labeled with a number and a handwritten note. Number 1, Harold, no salt, extra potato. Number 3, Jean, bring extra blanket, cold last night. Number 4, Miss Eileen, cornbread, no sugar, check blood pressure meds. Number 6, Dorothy, cut small, hard for her to chew. These were not his meals. Solomon ironed his one good shirt every morning. Same shirt, same iron, same cracked mirror propped against the wall. He'd worked as a dishwasher at the Longworth for 4 years. The Longworth was the crown jewel of Whitfield Hospitality Group. Converted textile mill, exposed brick, copper fixtures, a $220 per plate tasting menu that food critics called transcendent. Solomon had applied as a line cook. He had the skills, he had the knowledge, he had everything, except a clean background check. At 19, he'd been arrested outside a convenience store. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin color, charges dropped within 48 hours. But the record stayed. The hiring manager looked at his file, looked at him, and said, "We've got a spot in the dish pit." Solomon took it. No argument, not once in 4 years. He'd learned something growing up without parents. Fighting the system costs more than it pays, so he kept his head down, washed plates, stayed invisible. But every night, after everyone else went home, he became someone else entirely. He arrived at the Longworth before anyone, every morning, 6:45 sharp. Solomon entered through the loading dock, never the front door. Dishwashers don't use front doors. The only person already there was Ray Dawson, early 40s, white, face like a catcher's mitt, rough, sun-cracked, honest. Line cook, 6 years at the Longworth. The only person in the building who knew Solomon could cook. They had a ritual, unspoken, sacred. Ray would accidentally leave ingredients on the prep counter: butter, herbs, eggs, whatever was about to expire. Solomon would turn them into a staff meal before anyone arrived. Eggs Benedict one morning, shakshuka the next, a perfect French omelet on Fridays. The food was extraordinary, every single time. Ray leaned against the counter, watching Solomon plate a dish that belonged in a magazine. You're wasting yourself back there, Saul. Solomon didn't look up. I'm not wasting anything. I'm right where I need to be. Ray shook his head. He'd had this conversation before. Solomon always ended it the same way. During service, Solomon was the engine nobody thanked. Fastest dishwasher the Longworth had ever seen. He reorganized the entire station. New rack flow, better spray angles, a timing system that cut turnaround by 20 minutes per service. The sous chef noticed, took credit in the weekly meeting. Solomon didn't correct him. He just hummed, gospel under his breath, and kept moving. After lunch service, Solomon walked into the walk-in cooler, back right corner. Separated from the restaurant's inventory by an invisible line only he respected. 8 plastic containers, stacked neat, numbered 1 through 8. None matched anything on the Longworth's menu. Number 1, chicken and potato, no salt. Number 4, cornbread, no sugar. Meatloaf, extra gravy. Number 6, sweet potato soup, cut small. Teresa Coleman, the general manager, walked past, glanced inside, saw the containers, paused half a second. She'd seen them 100 times, never asked, because she knew Solomon. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't wrong, but what no one saw was what it cost him. Solomon's checking account had $288. Rent was $850, due in 9 days. His knees ached from standing 14 hours a day. He did the math in his head constantly. $288 minus gas, minus food, minus the ingredients he bought out of pocket for the containers. The numbers never worked. They hadn't worked in months. But every evening, when he stood at that back prep station, when his hands touched a knife and the muscle memory took over, something shifted. His shoulders dropped. His jaw unclenched. The math stopped. Cooking was the only place where Solomon Harris was free. And the 8 people waiting for him every night, they were the only people who made him feel seen. But what Solomon didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that one of those 8 people was about to bring a billionaire to his knees. And Solomon's life would never look the same again. Douglas Whitfield hadn't set foot in one of his own kitchens in 9 years. It took a financial anomaly and a ghost from his past to drag him back. Let me tell you about the man who owned the building Solomon Harris washed dishes in. Douglas Whitfield, early 60s, silver hair, tailored suits. Reading glasses on a chain he never admitted were prescription. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car on the top floor of a glass tower in Buckhead. He built his empire from a single diner his father opened in 1968. 1 diner became 3. 3 became 12. 12 became 42 restaurants across the Southeast. The Longworth was his flagship, his pride. But pride was about all Douglas had left. His wife, Catherine, died 4 years ago. Cancer, slow, cruel. She spent her last months asking Douglas to sit with her. He spent them on the phone with lawyers and investors. He told himself he was securing her future. She didn't have one. Catherine was the only person who kept Douglas and his mother connected. She knew how to soften him. She knew how to listen to Eileen without making it a negotiation. She was the bridge. When Catherine died, the bridge collapsed. Douglas and Eileen had always been oil and water. He showed love through solutions. She needed love through presence. After the funeral, Douglas tried to move Eileen into a luxury, assisted living facility. Private room, full-time nurse, ocean view. Eileen refused. "You're paying money so you don't have to look at me, Douglas." "I'm trying to take care of you, Mom." "Then sit down and eat dinner with me. That's taking care of me." He didn't sit down. He wrote a check. She tore it up. The argument escalated over weeks, then months. Douglas called it stubbornness. Eileen called it abandonment. They were both wrong. They were both right. Eileen moved out of the family home and into a small ground-floor apartment in the old neighborhood where she grew up. The neighborhood had changed, boarded-up storefronts, cracked sidewalks, a closed community center. She lived on Social Security. $1,450 a month. She planted flowers on the windowsill and left the porch light on every night. Douglas knew the address. He never went. 4 years. Not one visit, not one call. And then one Tuesday morning, Garrett Cole placed a folder on Douglas's desk. "Sir, we've got an anomaly at the Longworth." The numbers were subtle, not screaming, just whispering. Someone on the dishwashing staff clocked out every night at 10:15, but the security cameras showed kitchen lights on until 1 or 2 a.m., 3 to 4 nights a week. Utility costs were up. Food inventory slightly off. Not enough to flag theft outright. Just enough to notice. Douglas opened the file. One name, Solomon Harris, dishwasher, 4 years. No incidents, no complaints. Douglas's jaw tightened. "I'll handle this myself." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Sir, get me a busboy uniform." He arrived at the Longworth the next morning as Doug Wilson. New transfer from another location, jeans, ball cap, no watch. His $40,000 Patek Philippe stayed locked in the glove compartment. His hands were too soft, his posture too straight. He looked exactly like what he was, a CEO playing dress-up. Teresa Coleman had been told a corporate trainee was coming. She didn't know it was the owner of the company. She paired him with Solomon for orientation. Solomon shook his hand at the dish station. Firm grip, direct eye contact, warm. "Welcome to the pit, man. It's loud, it's hot, and nobody's going to thank you. But you'll eat good, I promise." Douglas expected suspicion. He got kindness. The first shift was brutal. Douglas was terrible. Plates slipped. The machine jammed. Hot water burned his wrists. Solomon showed him everything. How to stack, how to spray, how to keep the rhythm, without a single flash of impatience. During a break, Solomon leaned against the wall and started talking. Casual. Easy. He mentioned his night route, didn't explain it, just dropped a name like it was nothing. "Miss Eileen told me last night she used to swing dance on the beach when she was young, 78 years old, and she still remembers every step." He laughed, warm, genuine. Douglas heard the name. His hand, holding a bus tray, stopped midair. 1 beat, 2 beats. He turned away, pretended to wipe down a counter. Solomon noticed. He always noticed small things about people, but he didn't ask. That wasn't his way. That night, Douglas sat in his SUV in the parking lot. The restaurant closed at 10 p.m. By 10:30, the last cook walked out. At 10:45, every light in the kitchen went dark. Then one flickered back on. Solomon was still inside. And Douglas Whitfield, the man who hadn't spoken to his own mother in 4 years, sat in the dark, watching, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. What was Solomon Harris doing in that kitchen every night? And why did he know a name that Douglas had been running from since his wife's funeral? What happened next wasn't dramatic. There was no soundtrack, no slow motion, just a man in a dark kitchen doing what no one asked him to do. On a night that almost took everything from him. Night 2 of Douglas's Undercover shift. Friday, the worst night of the week. 210 covers, short-staffed. The sous chef screaming at everyone within arm's reach. One dishwasher called in sick. The other machine jammed twice during the dinner rush. Plates piling up, servers shouting. The kitchen was a war zone. Solomon handled it like a metronome. Calm, steady, never raised his voice, never broke rhythm. While the rest of the kitchen cracked under pressure, Solomon kept the plates cycling, the line moving, the chaos contained. Douglas watched him from across the station. Every hour that passed, Another assumption inside him crumbled. This man was not a thief. Service ended at 10:15 p.m. Staff trickled out one by one. Ray Dawson paused at the back door, looked at Solomon, gave a small nod. Solomon nodded back, an understanding that needed no words. Ray left. The kitchen went quiet. Douglas told Teresa he forgot his jacket inside. She waved him through. He slipped into the dry storage room, cracked the door 2 inches, and waited. 10:30 p.m. Solomon was alone. And then, he changed. Not his clothes. His entire being. The quiet, invisible dishwasher disappeared. In his place stood someone who moved through the kitchen like he built it with his own hands. He opened the walk-in cooler, pulled out the 8 containers he'd prepped during lunch, set them on the back station. Then he started the real work. He grabbed what the restaurant was about to throw away. Vegetable trim, carrot tops, potato ends, celery hearts, proteins that were prepped but never plated. Bread rolls from lunch service that would hit the trash by morning. Nothing that would ever be served to a guest. Nothing stolen. All of it hours away from a dumpster. And he cooked. Not reheated. Cooked. He broke down a chicken carcass into stock in under 4 minutes. Roasted root vegetables with herbs he'd brought from home in a small plastic bag. Seasoned by memory. No measuring spoons, no recipe cards, no hesitation. His knife moved with the precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. He plated each container with intention. Garnish on top. A handwritten note tucked under every lid. Number 1, Harold. Eat your vegetables, old man. Number 4, Miss Eileen. Cornbread, no sugar. Just how you like it. Take your meds tonight. Number 6, Dorothy, happy early birthday. Extra pudding for you. Douglas stood behind the storage room door, his chest tight, his hands white-knuckled on the door frame. This was not a dishwasher. This was a chef. 11:35 p.m. Solomon was sealing the last container when his phone buzzed. He answered. His face changed instantly, the calm drained away, replaced by razor-sharp focus. How bad? Is she bleeding? Don't move her. I'm coming. He threw all 8 containers into 2 insulated bags, grabbed his keys, and ran out the back door. Douglas followed. Solomon's car, a 2010 sedan, with a cracked windshield and a taped taillight, tore out of the parking lot. Douglas's black SUV stayed 3 car lengths behind. They drove 20 minutes into a rougher part of the city, past boarded-up storefronts, past a shuttered community center with weeds growing through the parking lot, past streetlights that flickered like they were tired of trying. Solomon stopped in front of a small house, jumped out before the engine fully died, ran inside with the bag still hanging from his shoulder. Douglas parked across the street, got out, walked to the window. Inside, Calvin Moore, 15 years old, Solomon's neighbor, was kneeling beside an elderly woman on the kitchen floor. Dorothy Sands, 82, nearly blind. She'd slipped on a wet floor, trying to make herself tea at midnight, blood on her forehead, hands trembling. Solomon was already on his knees beside her, calm, precise. He checked her pupils with a flashlight from his phone, positioned her safely on her side, applied pressure to the wound with a clean towel, called a free medical hotline, and described her symptoms clearly enough for the nurse to assess over the phone. No ambulance. Dorothy couldn't afford one. Solomon knew that without asking. The wound was shallow, no concussion, but she needed watching through the night. Solomon looked at Calvin. School tomorrow. Go home. Don't be late. Calvin hesitated. Solomon gave him a look, firm but warm. Calvin left. Then Solomon cleaned Dorothy's kitchen floor, found the crooked anti-slip mat that caused her fall, straightened it, heated up container number 6, sat on the edge of her bed, and fed her sweet potato soup. one spoonful at a time. Dorothy held his wrist with both hands. Her voice was barely there. You didn't have to come, Sol. Solomon smiled. Gentle, tired. You sound just like my grandma. She used to say the exact same thing. But I had to, Miss Dorothy. I always have to. Outside the window, Douglas Whitfield watched a man with $288 in his bank account spoon-feed an 82-year-old stranger at midnight. With a patience and tenderness that no amount of money on earth could buy. 12:40 a.m. Dorothy was asleep. Solomon pulled the blanket up to her chin, checked the lock on her front door twice, left the rest of the food in her fridge for tomorrow, got back in his car, and kept going. Douglas followed. Stop after stop. House number 1, Harold Brennan, Vietnam veteran, wheelchair, rusted mobile home. Solomon knocked 3 times. Harold opened. They shook hands like old friends. Solomon checked his oxygen tank, asked about his lung results, left the food, and a firm reminder to take his evening pills. House number 3, Gene, 84, alone in a dark duplex. His television was on with no sound, just for the light. Solomon brought an extra blanket because last night was cold, sat with him 10 minutes, told a story about a customer at the restaurant who sent back a steak 4 times. Gene laughed. First time that day, maybe that week, every house. Solomon stayed. He never just dropped food and left. He checked door locks, changed dead light bulbs, reminded them about medications, asked questions only someone who truly knew them would think to ask. To him, they weren't charity cases. They were his people. 1:15 a.m., 2 stops left. House number 4, Miss Eileen, and house number 8. Solomon drove through empty streets, eyes heavy, hands gripping the wheel too tight. He was running on 4 hours of sleep from last night. He would get 3 tonight, maybe less. Douglas followed in the dark. He wasn't thinking about labor costs anymore. He wasn't thinking about stolen food or background checks or anomaly reports. He was watching a man who could barely afford gas drive across a broken city at 1 a.m. to make sure 8 forgotten people didn't go to bed hungry, didn't go to bed scared, didn't go to bed believing nobody in this world gave a damn about them. And Douglas Whitfield, billionaire, CEO, owner of 42 restaurants, couldn't stop his hands from shaking. Douglas Whitfield hadn't cried since his wife's funeral. That night, sitting in his SUV outside a house he didn't know the address of, watching a dishwasher drive away to the next stop on a route no one asked him to run. He came dangerously close. The next morning, Douglas arrived at the Longworth before Solomon. He was different, quiet, distracted. The other staff noticed Doug the busboy seemed somewhere else entirely. Solomon walked in at 6:45, right on time. Dark circles carved under his eyes. His shoulders sat a little lower than yesterday, but he smiled at Douglas the moment he saw him. "Morning, Doug. You surviving?" Douglas almost couldn't answer. He managed a nod. During a slow stretch between lunch prep and service, Douglas tried to probe, kept it casual, leaned against the counter like it was nothing. "You get home late last night, Sol?" Solomon wiped down the dish machine, didn't look up. "Had some stuff to take care of." "What kind of stuff?" Solomon paused, looked at Douglas, not with suspicion, but with the quiet assessment of a man deciding whether the question was real. Then he answered simply, "I deliver food to some older folks in the neighborhood. They live alone. Nobody cooks for them, so I do." He said it like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, like anyone in his shoes would do the same, like it didn't cost him sleep, money, and the last shreds of his body holding together. Douglas reached into his pocket. He'd prepared for this. A folded stack of bills, $500. He slid it across the stainless steel counter toward Solomon. Casual, like it was nothing. "Buy food for them, or for yourself. Call it a tip." Solomon looked at the money, then at Douglas. His expression didn't shift. Not to gratitude, not to pride, just stillness. He pushed the bills back across the counter, gently, with one finger. I appreciate that, Doug. I really do. But I'm not doing any of this for a tip. A silence stretched between them. Solomon turned back to the dish machine. Douglas stood there, money still in his hand, and for the first time in his adult life, he had absolutely no idea what to do with cash. Then it happened. As Douglas pulled his hand back, something slipped from his jacket pocket. A small rectangle of heavy paper. It hit the wet floor, face up. A business card. Not a busboy's card. Gold-embossed lettering. Douglas A. Whitfield, Chairman and CEO, Whitfield Hospitality Group. Solomon bent down and picked it up. He looked at the name, looked at the title, looked at Doug. A long beat passed. The kitchen hummed around them. Solomon's face didn't shift to anger, didn't shift to betrayal. It shifted to something quieter, understanding, like a puzzle piece clicking into place without any fanfare. He set the card on the counter, face down, said nothing, and went back to washing dishes. He didn't change his posture, didn't change his tone, didn't treat Douglas any differently for the rest of the shift. Because Solomon Harris didn't perform kindness for an audience. He did it because it was who he was, regardless of who was watching. That afternoon, Solomon sat on a plastic crate outside the loading dock. Eyes closed, leaning against the brick wall. His phone buzzed with a text from Calvin. Jean's electricity got cut off. Late on the bill. Dorothy is okay, but needs someone checking the wound every day. Harold needs a ride to his lung appointment Thursday, but has no car. Solomon read the messages, opened his notebook, wrote in neat block letters on tomorrow's page. Jean, ask the library about utility assistance programs. Harold, find a ride for Thursday. Dorothy, buy new anti-slip mat, $12 at dollar store. He closed the notebook, breathed out, said quietly to himself, voice tired but not broken, one day at a time, Sewell. One day at a time. He didn't know if he could keep carrying this alone much longer. The weight was real. The math was impossible. The system was failing every single person on his route, and the one man with the power to change all of it was standing 10 feet away, holding a mop, wearing a disguise, and carrying a secret that was about to crack wide open. That night, Douglas made a phone call that would unravel a secret he'd been burying for 4 years. And it started with a name he heard from a dishwasher's mouth. Douglas sat in his Buckhead penthouse, jacket off, tie loosened. The city skyline glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows he never bothered to look at anymore. He called Garrett Cole. I need everything on Solomon Harris, full file, employment history, personal background, all of it. Garrett paused. Sir, is this still about the labor anomaly? It's about something else. Just get it done. He hung up, paced the living room, stopped, paced again. He couldn't get the name out of his head. Miss Eileen. Solomon had said it so casually during that break, like she was just another person on his route, another elderly woman who liked cornbread and forgot her medication. But Douglas's mother's name was Eileen, Eileen Ann Whitfield, and she lived in the old neighborhood, the same neighborhood Solomon drove through every night at 1 a.m. Douglas opened his phone, pulled up the last known address he had for his mother, a ground-floor apartment on Edgewood. He'd saved it 2 years ago when his lawyer sent a wellness check update. He never visited. Then he opened the dashcam footage from his SUV. He'd turned it on the night he followed Solomon. He scrubbed through the video. Stop 1, stop 2, stop 3, stop 4. Solomon parked in front of a small apartment. Blue door, paint fading, flower pots on the windowsill, yellow chrysanthemums, half wilted but still alive. Someone was watering them. Solomon knocked. 3 soft knocks. A rhythm. Like a code only two people understood. The door opened. Warm yellow light spilled out. A small figure stood in the doorway. Silver hair, thin frame, cardigan sweater. Douglas couldn't see her face clearly on the dashcam, but he saw the gesture. She reached up and placed her hand on Solomon's cheek. A slow, tender motion. Then she leaned forward slightly and smiled. Douglas stopped breathing. His mother used to do that exact thing. Every time he came home from school, every time he walked through the front door, hand on cheek, lean forward, smile. It was her signature, her fingerprint of love. He hadn't felt that hand on his face in 4 years. Douglas closed the laptop, put his face in his hands. He didn't need Garrett to confirm anything. He didn't need records or addresses or background checks. He knew. Miss Eileen, house number 4, cornbread no sugar, forgets her blood pressure meds, likes to tell stories about swing dancing on the beach, was his mother, and a dishwasher making $13.50 an hour had been taking care of her every single night, while her own son, the billionaire, hadn't even picked up the phone. The next morning, Douglas Whitfield walked into the Longworth kitchen, not as Doug the busboy, not as the CEO, but as a son who just discovered his mother was being kept alive by the last person on earth he ever expected. He wore his real clothes, pressed shirt, no ball cap, no apron. His posture was different, not the stiff confidence of a billionaire, but the unsteady walk of a man carrying something that had broken open inside him overnight. Teresa Coleman saw him come through the front door and nearly dropped her clipboard. "Mr. Whitfield?" Her face cycled through 3 emotions in 2 seconds: confusion, embarrassment, fear. Douglas raised a hand. "Teresa, sit down. You're not in trouble. Nobody is." He told her briefly who he was, that he'd been undercover for 3 days, and that he needed to speak with Solomon Harris, privately. Teresa's expression shifted when she heard Solomon's name. Her jaw tightened, not with fear, with protection. "Whatever you think he did wrong," she said quietly, "he didn't." Douglas met her eyes. "I know." Teresa brought Solomon to the private dining room, the one with the chandelier, the one where guests paid $220 a plate and left reviews calling the experience life-changing. Solomon walked in still wearing his dishwashing apron. Hands still damp, he stopped 2 steps inside the door. Douglas sat at the head of the table. No ball cap, no fake name tag. The business card Solomon had found yesterday was propped on the table between them, face up. Douglas spoke first. "You already knew, didn't you?" Solomon looked at the card, then at Douglas. "I had a feeling. Didn't change anything." "Sit down, Solomon." Solomon hesitated. He had never sat in this room. This room wasn't built for people like him. Every surface, every piece of crystal, every thread in the tablecloth was designed for a world that had never once invited him in. He sat down anyway. Douglas folded his hands on the table. His voice was steady, but barely. "I followed you, Solomon. 3 nights. I watched you stay 3 hours after close. I saw you cook in that kitchen with food we were going to throw away. I saw you drive across the city at 1 a.m. I saw you clean Dorothy's floor. I saw you check Harold's oxygen. I saw you sit with Gene in the dark, just so he wouldn't be alone." Solomon's face tightened. He was bracing. He thought he knew what was coming. Termination, using restaurant resources without permission. 4 years of invisible loyalty about to be erased in 1 sentence. Douglas didn't say what Solomon expected. "I'm not here to fire you." His voice cracked on the last word. He swallowed, tried again. "I'm here because of house number 4. Solomon went still. Douglas pulled out his phone, opened the dashcam screenshot from 2 nights ago. The blue door, the flower pots. The small figure in the doorway, with silver hair and a cardigan. He slid the phone across the table. "Miss Eileen," Douglas said. His voice was barely above a whisper now. "Her full name is Eileen Ann Whitfield." He looked at Solomon with eyes that were red and wet and completely unguarded. "She's my mother." The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that swallows everything. Solomon stared at the photo. Then at Douglas. His eyes widened, not because of the money, not because of the power, because he recognized the pain. He had seen that same pain in Eileen's eyes every single night, when she told stories about the past and then suddenly stopped talking, when she laughed and then went quiet for too long, when she once asked him, softly, sitting at her kitchen table at 1:30 in the morning, "Do you think a person can be angry at someone and love them at the same time, Sewell?" Now Solomon understood who she was talking about. He spoke quietly. "She mentions you, never says your name, but I always knew she was talking about someone. She told me once, 'My son built an empire, but never learned how to sit down.'" Douglas put his forehead on the table, and he broke. The CEO of a billion-dollar restaurant empire. The man whose signature could close a deal or end a career. He wept in front of a dishwasher in his own private dining room. And he didn't care. Solomon didn't speak. He didn't touch Douglas's shoulder. He didn't offer comfort. He just sat there, present, still. The way he sat with Dorothy when she cried. The way he sat with Jean in the dark. The way he sat with Eileen every night. Not trying to fix anything, just refusing to leave. When Douglas finally lifted his head, Solomon reached into his back pocket, pulled out the plastic-wrapped notebook, opened it to the first page, and handed it to Douglas. "If you want to know how your mother is living, read every page." Douglas read. 3 years of entries, every night documented, every stop recorded. But the entries about Eileen, house number 4, were the most detailed of all. Number 4, Miss Eileen, she told me about swing dancing on the beach with her husband tonight. Her eyes lit up, then she went quiet for a long time. I didn't ask why. Number 4, Miss Eileen, forgot her blood pressure meds 3 days in a row. Left them on the nightstand with a note. She said I worry like a daughter. I told her I'll take that as a compliment. Number 4, Miss Eileen, she cried tonight. Didn't say why. I sat with her until she stopped. Sometimes people don't need words. They just need someone who won't leave. Douglas read that last line and couldn't breathe. Someone who won't leave. Because he did leave 4 years ago. He chose pride over presence. He chose writing checks over sitting down. He walked away from his own mother, and a stranger making $13.50 an hour stayed. Douglas closed the notebook, looked at Solomon. "Thank you for taking care of my mother." Solomon shook his head. "I didn't take care of her. I just brought food and sat down. The real caring, that's your job. She's been waiting for you, Douglas. 4 years now." Douglas Whitfield didn't become a billionaire by making emotional decisions. But what he did next wasn't business. It wasn't strategy. It was personal. 2 days later, Solomon was called to the private dining room again. This time, when he walked in, it wasn't just Douglas. Seated around the table, Garrett Cole with a folder in front of him, Teresa Coleman, eyes already glistening, Ray Dawson still in kitchen whites, and Calvin Moore, 15 years old, cleanest hoodie he owned, sitting in a chair too big for him, looking like he'd accidentally walked into someone else's life. Solomon stopped in the doorway. He'd never seen all these people in the same room. Douglas stood, composed now. The grief from 2 days ago hadn't disappeared. It had compressed into something harder. Purpose. "Solomon, I'm going to say a few things. I need you to listen before you push any of it back." Solomon stood with his arms at his sides, still in his apron, and waited. First, Whitfield Hospitality Group is offering you a full culinary scholarship to the Atlanta Culinary Institute. Tuition, books, housing, all covered, classes in the morning, apprentice sous chef at the Longworth during evening service. 18 months. Solomon blinked, didn't move. Second, we're establishing a nonprofit called the Odessa Harris Foundation. Solomon's breath caught. Douglas continued. Named after your grandmother, the woman who raised you from 4 years old until she passed when you were 15. The woman who taught you every recipe you cook on that route. The cornbread, the meatloaf, the sweet potato soup. He paused. Let it land. The foundation will fund your night route officially. Delivery van, refrigeration, volunteers, medical check-ins for elderly residents living alone. You'll be executive director. Goal, 8 people to 50 within the first year. Solomon's jaw tightened. His eyes locked on the table. Third, everyone on your route, Harold, Jean, Dorothy, all 8, will have medical costs, prescriptions, and home repairs covered by the Catherine Whitfield Foundation. Douglas's voice softened on his wife's name. It's been inactive since Catherine died. I'm reopening it for elder care. Harold gets his lung treatments. Dorothy gets weekly health visits. Jean never loses electricity again. The room was still. Calvin stared at Solomon with wide eyes. Ray had his hand over his mouth. Teresa gripped the table edge until her knuckles went white. Fourth, Douglas stopped. The CEO disappeared. Only the son remained. I'm going to see my mother. I'm going to drive to that apartment with the blue door and knock. But I need you with me, Solomon. She trusts you. I need her to open the door. Silence filled the room. Solomon looked at Douglas for a long time, then one word. Quiet, almost fragile. Odessa? Douglas nodded. Garrett pulled your records. Your grandmother raised you until 15, after she died. Foster care. Aged out at 18. Taught yourself to cook with her recipes. Everything on that route for 3 years. It's her food. Solomon's composure, the wall he'd maintained through every loss, every indignity, every silent night, washing dishes for 4 years. Finally cracked, not dramatically, not loudly. His chin dropped, his shoulders trembled. He put one hand over his eyes, and he breathed, ragged, uneven, the sound a man makes when he's held everything so long that letting go feels like breaking. Ray stood, walked across the room, put his hand on Solomon's shoulder, said nothing, just stood there. After a long moment, Solomon lowered his hand, eyes red, voice rough. I don't want to be a charity case. You're not. You're the most qualified person in this building. You've proved it every night in a kitchen nobody was watching. This isn't charity, Solomon. This is the job you should have had 4 years ago. Solomon nodded, once, slowly. Okay. That afternoon, they drove to the old neighborhood, Solomon's sedan, Douglas in the passenger seat, first time in his life, sitting in someone else's car. The sedan rattled over potholes. Douglas didn't complain. They stopped in front of the apartment. Blue door, faded paint, yellow chrysanthemums on the windowsill, half wilted but still reaching for light. Solomon stepped out. Douglas didn't move, hands gripping his knees. Solomon leaned to the window. You don't need to say anything perfect. You just need to walk in. Douglas stepped out. They stood at the door. Solomon knocked. 3 soft knocks. Same rhythm as every night. The door opened. Eileen Whitfield, small, silver-haired, bright eyes, cardigan with a missing button. She saw Solomon first. Smiled. Soul, you're early tonight. Then she saw Douglas. The smile disappeared, not from anger, from shock, from 4 years of silence crashing into one doorway. Douglas stood there, eyes red, voice barely a whisper. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have come a long time ago. Eileen looked at her son, then at Solomon. She understood, with the instinct only a mother carries, that this man had somehow brought her boy home. She didn't ask how. She stepped aside, opened the door wide. "Come in, Douglas. Dinner's warm." She hadn't cooked. There was nothing on the stove. But that's what mothers say. Every language, every home, it means one thing only. You're allowed to come back. Solomon stepped away, gave them space. Douglas crossed the threshold. Eileen took her son's hand and held on. Solomon walked to his car. He didn't need to stay. His work tonight, the real work, was done. 6 months later, you wouldn't recognize the block where Eileen Whitfield lives, and you definitely wouldn't recognize Solomon Harris. A white delivery van sat parked outside the old community center. Fresh paint, clean lines. On the side, a logo in warm gold lettering, the Odessa Harris Foundation. Nobody eats alone. Solomon stood beside the van on opening day, chef's coat, his name embroidered on the chest. First time in his life his name had ever been stitched onto anything official. The block was alive. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Harold Brennan sat in his wheelchair in the front row, clapping with both hands. Dorothy Sands stood beside him, new glasses, bandage gone, holding Calvin Moore's arm for balance. Jean was there too. New jacket, standing in the sun, smiling. The local news crew set up a camera. The anchor described the story as a nonprofit born from one man's refusal to let food or people go to waste. The segment aired that evening. Within a week, it had 1.8 million views. The night route expanded from 8 people to 35 in the first 3 months. 12 volunteers signed up. Restaurant workers from across the Whitfield chain, plus medical students from the local university doing free health screenings every other week. Solomon still cooked every meal himself. Same recipes. Nana Dessa's recipes. He said he'd hand them off eventually, but not yet. At the Atlanta Culinary Institute, Solomon was the oldest student in his class by more than a decade. He was also the best. His instructors noted his technique was already professional grade. What he needed wasn't training. It was the credential the world required before it would take him seriously. At the Longworth, Solomon now worked the line as an apprentice sous chef. Same kitchen where he'd washed dishes for 4 years. The sous chef, who once took credit for his ideas, now took direction from him during prep. There was no confrontation, no dramatic speech. Solomon simply did the work. The hierarchy adjusted itself. Teresa Coleman made it official with a promotion letter. She handed it to him in the kitchen, not the office. She said, "You were never a dishwasher, Solomon. You were a chef in disguise." Solomon took the letter, folded it, put it in the same back pocket where he kept the notebook. Eileen and Douglas had dinner together every Sunday now. Not at his penthouse in Buckhead, at her apartment, the one with the blue door and the chrysanthemums. Douglas brought food he tried to cook himself badly. Eileen never said, "I forgive you." She said things like, "Too much salt, Douglas," and "You burn the rice again." And Douglas understood that this was how she said everything was going to be okay. Harold Brennan got his lung treatments covered by the Catherine Whitfield Foundation. He started physical therapy. Within 4 months, he took his first steps out of the wheelchair with a walker. Dorothy Sands had a health aide visiting twice a week. Jean's electricity was never cut again. He watched cooking shows now with the volume on. A national outlet picked up Solomon's story. The headline, "The Dishwasher Who Made Sure Nobody Ate Alone." Whitfield Hospitality Group received hundreds of job applications from people with nonviolent records and aged-out foster youth, all inspired by Solomon's path. Douglas created a company-wide hiring initiative called the Second Plate Program. Guaranteed interviews for applicants the system had written off. 16 restaurants across the chain joined in the first year. Calvin Moore, the 15-year-old who used to help Solomon deliver meals on weekends, received a college prep scholarship from the Odessa Harris Foundation. In his application essay, he wrote, "Mr. Saul taught me that taking care of people isn't a burden. It's a privilege." 3 other cities reached out about replicating the night route model. Solomon was invited to speak at a national hospitality conference. He said yes. On one condition: Harold, Dorothy, and Jean had to sit in the front row. "They're the reason I'm standing here," he told the organizers, "not the other way around." The audience gave him a standing ovation before he said a single word. But the thing that mattered most to Solomon, the thing he never told reporters or conference audiences or cameras, was smaller than all of that. It was Sunday night. Eileen's kitchen, Douglas washing dishes in the sink, badly, Eileen laughing at him from the table, and Solomon's seat at that table, always set, always waiting. That was the reward. One year after Douglas Whitfield followed a dishwasher into the dark, he found himself back in a kitchen, but this time he wasn't watching through a window. He was inside, Thanksgiving night, Eileen's apartment. The blue door was open. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. The table stretched from the kitchen into the living room. Too many chairs. Not enough matching plates. Perfect. Eileen sat at the head, wearing her cardigan with the missing button she still refused to replace. Douglas beside her, no suit, just a flannel shirt. Ray Dawson. Teresa Coleman. Calvin Moore. 16 now, helping carry dishes. Harold Brennan, wheelchair pulled close, telling a Vietnam story nobody interrupted. Dorothy Sands, new glasses, reading a cranberry jar label out loud because she finally could. Jean, sitting quietly, smiling. Television at home turned off for the first time in years because tonight he had something better than background noise. Solomon stood in Eileen's tiny kitchen, one gas burner, one oven that ran 15 degrees hot. Tonight's menu: every recipe from Nana Dessa's collection. Cornbread without sugar for Eileen, potatoes without salt for Harold, extra pudding for Dorothy. Douglas stood up from the table, rolled his sleeves, walked into the kitchen. "Where do you need me?" Solomon looked at him, slow smile. "You know how to wash dishes?" Douglas was terrible. Soap everywhere, water on the floor. But he stayed at that sink for an hour. The billionaire CEO of 42 restaurants washing dishes in his mother's kitchen because a dishwasher taught him what none of his restaurants ever could. Eileen watched from the table. She leaned toward Harold and whispered, "You see my son doing dishes? Worse than when he was 5. The whole table laughed. After midnight, everyone gone. Solomon sat alone on the front porch, streetlight buzzing overhead. He opened the notebook, fuller now, cracked spine, pages warped from steam and time, turned to a blank page, wrote today's date, neat block letters, Thanksgiving, table full, bellies full, small house but enough room. Miss Eileen held Douglas's hand the whole meal. Nobody talked about the 4 years. Didn't need to. Cornbread came out the best I've ever made. Nana Dessa would have said, "Not bad," and I would have smiled. He closed the notebook, tucked it in his back pocket, drove home. The studio was still small, but now there was a new bookshelf, a professional knife set, and on the fridge, a photograph. Solomon, Eileen, and Douglas, sitting around the table in the Blue Door apartment. First Thanksgiving together. Nobody was posing, nobody looking at the camera. They were just eating. That was enough. That's the story. No superheroes, no lottery tickets, just a man, a kitchen, and the decision to keep showing up, even when nobody was counting. If it did, drop a comment and tell me. Who's the Solomon in your life? Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe so these stories keep getting told.
You know who the best people are? Not the ones who have when everyone's watching, not the ones who donate on the camera, not the ones who post it about online. The best people are the ones who doing good at 1 a.m. when nobody sees, when nobody knows, when there's no applause, no thank you, no reward. Just them, alone, doing the right thing because they can't not do it. And those people, they are usually the ones with the least, not the richest, not the most powerful, not the quietest, the most invisible, the ones nobody notices because they are too busy noticing everyone else. So look around you. There's someone in your life right now doing things nobody sees, cooking, cleaning, checking in, showing up every day without complaining, without asking for credit. And you probably haven't thanked them. You probably haven't been noticed them today before it's too late. Because so people don't last forever. And when they are gone, that's when you feel how much they carry. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice, every week. And remember, the people who do the most usually say the least. Pay attention. They are right in front of you.